All right, so we have Johnny Avello, head of DraftKings Sportsbook, joining us today. Major League Baseball opening day is finally here. After a prolonged wait, sometimes it felt like we would never get to this day, but we have a 60-game sprint in front of us, a universal DH. Heck, we don't even know how many postseason teams there are going to be at this point if you looked at the reports that came out on Tuesday night. So I guess just from your aspect and from your standpoint, the first thing I want to start with, DraftKings is offering a lot of different promos to welcome back baseball. I know they have one where if you bet $25 on featured Major League Baseball games, you get a $5 bonus for every home run the team hits. You have another great promo where any 2019 All-Star goes deep, that pays out at least $25. There's a huge boost on that. I was just kind of curious, what goes into coming up with certain promotional items? Like, is there a team that sits down and kind of says, well, what would be fun for this event?
Exactly. It's a promo team, and those guys, there's about three or four of them, and they sit around and decide what they believe will be the best promotions for the day. And you'll not only find them on Major League Baseball, you'll find them throughout the week on various events. They're very creative, and I think those promos are what keeps some of our users around, and we'll continue to keep them around because we're not stopping. The promos will continue to go on.
How much do you evaluate what other sports books do when developing your own promos? Do you say, like, okay, wow, they're coming out swinging with something here, we need to match that? Or do you guys just kind of stay consistent and say, I know what works, or we know what works for DraftKings, and that's what we're going to do?
Oh, we know it works, but you still have to keep an eye on the competition. If the competition's doing something that we think is, getting a leg up, we're gonna go over the top and do something even better than that. So you certainly have to watch your competition when it comes to promoting the product.
So let's talk a little bit about baseball specifically, and I feel like this entire season is sort of about the New York Yankees. It all seems to start and stop with the Yankees. Obviously, they add Garrett Cole over the offseason. There's a lot of hype. The expectation is that this team is going to win the World Series, and looking at the betting splits from DraftKings, it kind of feels like that's where bettors are at right now. They love the Yankees, both in the futures market and even with some of the individual awards, the MVP, the AL Cy Young as well. I believe last time we saw it, they were getting 39% of the handle and 32% of all bets to win the World Series. And I believe 53% of the action to win the American League. Can you just talk a little bit about the Yankees and why you think people are on this team and what the response has been on the futures markets?
Well, it's a team won 103 games last year and probably could have won more than that. It wasn't the greatest start for them either. So the team's just loaded. I mean, they're solid in just about every position. Great pitching staff. Great bullpen. So that's what you want to start the season. Now, things don't always work out the way you want them to. They're, especially in a year like this, a 60-game season. We have a virus that's out there that anybody can contract at any time. So, if this was a 162 game season, I think the Yankees would probably get the job done and win in 100 plus games because they'd find their stride at some point. But in a 60 game season like this, who knows? You need to start off well. You need to stay healthy. Now, when you look at some of the bets, the Yankees, of course, taking a lot of World Series money, a lot of division money, a lot of pennant money. Gleyber Torres taking a lot of money on the MVP side. As you mentioned, Cole for Cy Young. These kind of bets make sense. And but like I said, I've been around baseball, watching and booking baseball for a long time. Things just don't always turn out the way you think they're going to.
Yeah, I saw actually that Aroldis Chapman is even drawing some money on the AL Cy Young front. I don't think a reliever has won the Cy Young since Eric Gagne in 2003. So, I mean, for the fact that in a 60-game season especially that you would have a reliever get that type of action on the AL MVP or AL Cy Young market, to me is kind of an eye-opener. You touched on it a little bit. Obviously, we're talking about a 60-game season here. Coronavirus could knock out 3, 4, 5 players at any given time. To that end, is that a consideration that DraftKings kind of puts into play when setting markets, when setting lines? And do you think, and I'll even kind of turn this around from a bettor's perspective, Do you think that all of these variables, these unprecedented variables, kind of create situations where there may be additional value for underdog type, players and underdogs on futures markets?
I believe so. Let's start with the teams themselves in the futures markets. Let's take a team like the Orioles or Miami Marlins, teams that aren't expected to do well. I mean, the Orioles are projected to win 20 games. Let's say the Orioles jump out to 15-3 start. With a 60-game season, they're going to be hard to catch at that point. So that's where the value lies. In a team like the Orioles, certainly over the course of 162 games, they don't have the horses to get them there. But in a short season, what are we, 40% normal of a normal season, they have a chance to get there. So, yeah, that's where the value lies in the future side. And the same with the players. If certain players, aren't going to be around for the entire 60-game season, they're going to miss 15 games or a couple of weeks, then there's value in other players for some of those other markets. So, yeah, I agree with you on that.
So I kind of want to keep it in New York here and talking about, and I don't necessarily want to call them an underdog, but certainly a team that's a little bit under the radar over the past few years is the New York Mets. There's a lot of belief coming out in New York that the Mets are in position to make a run in the NL East, and we've seen in this division, obviously Washington comes out of nowhere after a sloppy start a year ago. They go on to win the World Series. How much motivation is going to be there with the Nationals to repeat? The Phillies have a ton of questions, especially in the bullpen. The Braves have run into some bad luck here early in summer camp. They've been dealing with a variety of issues. And it seems to be that bettors right now are kind of taking a liking to the Mets, not only as a long shot to win the World Series, but especially to win the National League, which is where we're really seeing a lot of action backing this team. I mean, what are your impressions of that?
Well, being a Met fan myself for many, many years, I understand why the bets are being bet. They're bet when I've been in Las Vegas for 41 years, running sports books here for about 35 of those, and the Mets were bet even out here. They're just a popular team, and they're wagered on to win the World Series every year. Now you take it in the market, where we are, back east, and the New Jersey market, the Pennsylvania market, you're going to get Met money. I mean, it's just there. But with that being said, the Mets are a pretty good team. I mean, they had a nice run last year. The pitching staff's intact. Capable. You mentioned that division. There's 4 teams there that actually any one of those 4 could win it. Marlins being the weakest of the bunch, but the Mets are capable, and so they're drawing money at a fair price, and they'll probably continue to draw money until they start off, with a great beginning, and then the odds get driven too low. But right now, I think there's value there on the Mets.
Yeah, the Mets are particularly intriguing to me. I actually, for full disclosure, I cover the Phillies. I'm a Phillies beat writer, so I'm pretty familiar with the NL East specifically. I just think that the Mets and where the upside in that is that the bullpen was such a disaster for the vast majority of last season. You almost figure that it's going to level off in positive. There's going to be a positive regression on their end, where it can't possibly be where it was a year ago. So that team specifically, looking at some of their futures markets in terms of player props, I was a little bit surprised to see the number on Pete Alonso. Guy's coming off a 50-plus home run year a season ago, and I believe last time I checked, he was at plus 3,000 to win the NL MVP. Guys like Bryce Harper, obviously drawing a ton of attention on that market right now. I think he checked in at plus 1,800 the last time I looked. But it does seem like there is some love on not only Alonso, but also Jeff McNeil, who's a little bit of a longer shot as well. I believe he right now had the 4th highest handle at DraftKings coming into today. So it does seem like across the board, not only in terms of what the team may do, but some of the players, it looks like some bettors are kind of bullish on these guys.
Well, I'll start with Bryce Harper. I don't think Bryce Harper's reached his expectations as a baseball player. And, being from Las Vegas, I've known about him and watched him play for quite a few years, even before he made it to the majors. So maybe this is the year for him, and at least that's the thought process behind where the odds are and some of the money coming in. On the Mets side, you mentioned 2 guys that are young. that actually have the talent. The question is, do they put it all together for this quick 60-game season? But we're certainly taking money on both of those guys, and that's the way you bet futures. You look for odds where you can make some money. You don't look for 2 or 3 to 1 shots. You look for double-digit shots that you can get a payday on, and those two are viable candidates to get you there.
I'm kind of glad you mentioned that. So Jacob Degrom, obviously coming off of back-to-back Cy Young campaigns, doesn't seem like there's quite as much action on him. Is that just simply a matter of the number and the market reacting to the number, or is it just that, hey, we know that the Dodgers could be potentially a 45-win team. Walker Buehler looks like he's on the way up. That's a more intriguing option for some bettors. I mean, so do you think the response to DeGrom specifically is just more of a matter of fatigue? Is it the price? Is it that there are just better options out there?
The price is too short. It's just too short to make a wager on a guy where there's just a bunch of competition in the league itself. So, yeah, I just think it's the price being too short. And we'll keep some of this stuff up during the season. So we'll make some adjustments, and maybe you'll get them at a better price as the season goes on. Maybe you won't. But, it's something to keep an eye on as the season starts and continues on for a short season.
I mentioned it earlier with Aroldis Chapman, but it blows my mind looking at the NL Cy Young splits. Josh Hader getting 11% of all bets. I don't know, as a baseball guy, I mean, I fancy myself as a baseball guy. I'm surprised to see a reliever get that much action. Is it the 60-game dynamic that you think draws people to that? If anything, to me, this would be the year where I would think a starting pitcher, even with just a handful of starts, I mean, we're talking about realistically 12 to 13 starts, I would still think that they would play a more prominent role. But do you think the shortened season is what alters that interest and is altering that market a little bit?
Well, I'm still going to try to figure this season out also, like the better. I'm not exactly sure what a 60-game season equates to. I do know that starting pitchers will not be going the distance early, as usual. The question is, will they be going the full distance at any point during the season? Maybe this is a good year to play a reliever. So I'm going to figure it out and make adjustments on a daily basis. I mean, the season starts tonight, and there's a lot of things for us to look at. No fans in the stands, what the extra inning, man on second base means to the total, what the DH means to the total. So bookmakers will be making drastic adjustments right from the start tonight and moving on a daily basis.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up. It was one of the points in my notes here that I wanted to touch on. When we look at home field advantage, obviously that's going to influence every game across any sport. Is there any sense, and I don't know how much you want to get into this, but is there any sense of what the impact of not having fans in the stands will do to home field advantage, and more specifically on your end, how that might end up being priced out? Like, as you enter this season, would you say that the home field advantage is being priced the way it has been in the past, and then you will just make an adjustment from there, or has that already been taken into consideration?
There's going to be major adjustments. Of course, I don't know what the no fans in the stands actually means, but when you build in a home field advantage, the fans are part of that, and so there's still some home field advantage because being so familiar with the grounds themselves, the lack of travel on a particular night or week, so that certainly comes into play. But that no noise and no momentum from the fans, I don't know. So I can't tell you right now, but I might be able to tell you in a week.
Yeah, I almost wonder if the comfort factor and just the health considerations and that part of it may kind of offset the lack of momentum by crowd noise. So I mean, there are just so many different factors and considerations at play here that we haven't really had to look at before. So that's definitely, for me, as somebody that looks at betting markets, something that I have my eye on entering this thing. So now, you told me you're a Mets guy. I'm a Phillies guy. Looking at this team specifically, I think that there is an opportunity for this lineup to do some damage. When I look at some of the teams that are flying a little bit under the radar across baseball, I do believe that the Phillies are one of those teams. Like I said, there are certainly questions with the bullpen, and there are also questions in the back end of the Phillies starting rotation. But for 60 games, I do think that there's a possibility that this could be one of the teams that kind of, gets hot and goes on a run here. Anything that stands out to you about the Phillies in terms of either how they're priced or what the response has been on the Phillies in general? I know one of the things that, to be perfectly honest with you, after Noah Syndergaard went down, I was surprised to see that the Mets were still favored ahead of the Phillies in the division. But now, as time has gone on here, I do understand it. Just any general impressions of the Phillies and what you see from their markets?
Yeah, well, remember what I said about the Mets, being bet regardless of where it is in Las Vegas, and when I was taking bets there, and now certainly in the DraftKings network. So that's the reason why the Mets are a little bit lower than the Phillies. But the Phillies are right behind. The Mets are 20-1. The Phillies are 22. Mets are 20. Phillies are 22 to win the World Series. So they're right there, close to one another. I kind of agree with you. I think the Phillies have a lot of components that are in place. It's kind of similar team to the Mets as far as offensive production. So I think the two teams are close. Who gets off to a good start is certainly going to make a big difference. About the 60, and we don't know exactly what the playoff structure is yet. So I think the goal for these teams is to get a good start, stay focused, and try to be in the hunt. If you get too far behind, certainly your chances are going to be diminished. So, but I think the Phillies are right there with the Mets. I think Philly fans should be hopeful. They do have good, decent starting pitching, and I think they'll be right there in the hunt of it. Unless any team starts off poorly, then I think it's a struggle getting back in it.
Yeah, I know that around here specifically, the hope is that Joe Girardi's presence will, in and of itself, improve the performance of this team over what we saw the past couple of seasons with Gabe Kapler. I know that at least Philadelphia fans are sort of hitching their wagons to that idea. We'll see how that shakes out. I want to talk a little bit about the Denver market, the Colorado market. This is the first year now that Colorado sports bettors can bet legally. They've had, a couple opportunities with scattered UFC events, golf, NASCAR, things of that nature. I guess a couple different questions about baseball in Colorado and the Rockies specifically. What has the response been in the baseball market so far? It looks like that they are drawing some action to win the NL West as a very long shot. Obviously, the Dodgers, I believe, at minus 715 to win the West are the overwhelming favorite. Just any general impressions about the Rockies, what you see out there, what the response has been. Anything along those lines?
Well, from day one, when we opened up in Colorado, we saw, Denver team money come in, Rockies being one of them, Broncos. So the future market has been bet heavily on those teams in that area. And why not? I mean, you haven't ever had legal sports in your area. You get it, and now there's a chance to bet on your team by a push of a button. So I think the Colorado group to be able to have live sports betting. And they've shown it. They've backed their teams. Now, how good are the Rockies? I think the Rockies are a decent club. It's just that the Dodgers are the biggest favorite to win any division. And why not just look at that team? They go out and get Mookie Bettis, get another pitcher in Price, who's not actually going to be around early. But the team's just good, and they've been to the World Series a bunch of times in the last 5 years. Tough winning it for them, but they get there. So quality team that I don't know how they lose that division unless they have started weak in the past and then come on late. So, and Colorado has been in the mix there. It's just that they haven't been able to sustain during the long season. Short season, maybe it's different for them.
I was just going to say that they strike me as a team, as a long shot play that might make a little bit of sense in a condensed season that invites parity. Over 162, I certainly don't think that the pitching has the ability to stand up. But again, goofy year. I mean, maybe why not? So you could talk yourself into it. Real quick on the NL MVP market, we touched on this a little bit earlier with Bryce Harper. He is taking, I believe, the lead in terms of handle and percentage of bets placed on the NL MVP right now. How much of that has to do with just, Pennsylvania being a big market for DraftKings? How much of that has to do with name brand recognition? And how much of that has to do with, really just more or less that this is a good player that finished last season hot? I can tell you from my own personal perspective, getting to watch him pretty much every day down at Citizens Bank Park, he is locked in right now. I mean, I would not be stunned if he were in the top 3, 4 finalists for MVP consideration. So anything that you see on that market, and then obviously we have in Denver, in Colorado, Nolan Arenado priced similarly at plus 1,800. He's getting some action early on. And then, looking at the Cubs and the Illinois market, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but Indiana's obviously live at this point. Guys like Javi Baez plus 1,800 getting some action as well. Just any overall impressions of the NL MVP market?
Well, first of all, let's talk about Bryce Harper. He's a great talent. Maybe his head's not in the game all the time. Maybe he gets a little emotional, but what a great player he is. And he hasn't had the season that we've all expected, at least in his early time in playing in Major League Baseball. So the feeling is this is the year for him, and it could be. Why wouldn't it be? He's got power. He's fast. He's a good defensive player. He can do everything that's needed to be an MVP. So, will this be the year for Bryce Harper? And if it's not, then Bryce Harper will probably be bet again next year. All those other guys you mentioned are, capable of also having good years, but they're capable of having good years. He should have a good year. That's kind of the difference between, those different type of players. He's so talented, this guy. And as you get older, maybe you get smarter, maybe you get wiser, and hopefully this is I root for Bryce Harper. I like him as a player. I like what he brings to the game. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's intriguing about Bryce Harper, from my perspective, is that he's just so streaky. And I think that, again, we keep talking about the variable of the 60-game season, the condensed schedule. He, to me, is one of the few guys in baseball that can just get hot and get so hot for an extended period of time that for 2 months he could just put a team on his back. And if the Phillies make the postseason for the first time in 9 years, I think that there will be considerable hype around both the team and then specifically him. So I think that is also something to consider as well. Want to switch gears a little bit before we wrap this up and talk about the NBA. Obviously, when things paused in March, it looked like the Milwaukee Bucks out of the East and the LA Lakers out of the West were on a collision course to meet in the NBA Finals. Obviously, they're still the two favorites on the board right now, I believe. Plus 240 for the Lakers, plus 250 for the Bucks. How has the market evolved and changed since the stoppage to when we resume play here next week officially as the regular season kind of concludes and then we move into the postseason? What has the dynamic been there over the past few months?
Well, any momentum that the teams had is lost. So let's start at that point. And Lakers were playing well, Bucks and Clippers. And those teams will probably continue to play well. Let's face it, they have the best players in the game. But that's not where the money on the futures was focused. I would say that the Lakers continue to take a little money because they are the Lakers. But the money actually has come in on Philly as of late. Over the last week or so, the 76ers have taken a bunch of money. Previous to that, there were teams like the Portland Trailblazers taking money. The Portland Trailblazers just had a horrific season, and they were expected to do much better. Now, they weren't healthy, and now they are, as most teams are. After being off 4 months, it's time to get healthy. So they've taken money. The Pelicans have taken money. And some of the longer shots have Oklahoma City Thunder. And that's where the money was previous to the last 2 weeks. But in the last 2 weeks, 76ers, I would say, are taking the bulk of the future money. And
I'm not
the season got. Yeah, I'm just saying the season's getting closer, and I guess the fans want some rooting interest on. And now, let's face it, they are a pretty good team. And they do have some players that can gel at times, so who knows? But you still got to beat there's a bunch of people in the West that are saying that this is where it goes through, and even if you win the East, you have to get through the Lakers and the Clippers.
Johnny, I got to tell you, I'm not even remotely surprised to hear that. Sixers fans are eternal optimists. I think that's one thing. They were a miserable watch, to be perfectly honest with you, in January, February, leading into March. The vibe around the team was bad. A lot of people were tired of the coach. So I think everybody's been able to step back, take a breath of fresh air. And then the other big factor with that is now that Ben Simmons is healthy, and he was dealing with injury issues that would have possibly jeopardized his season back in March, and now he's back, and people are seeing videos of the jump shot on Twitter, hoping that this is finally going to happen. So I'm not entirely surprised that some of the action has come in on the Sixers. There was just such a bad vibe surrounding that team that I think now when people look at it, they say this is the one team that can truly benefit from a couple months off, because you talked about momentum and where teams were at in March. The Sixers had none of it. So I think that's a little bit going into that. One last thing real quick with the NBA. We look at the second-tier teams. The Nuggets are in there. Getting back to the Colorado market, I believe that they're priced at plus 2,500. Has there been a response across multiple states, and I guess specifically in Colorado? Is there any belief in the Nuggets, or is this just a team that people say, look, they're a good squad, but they're not a legitimate threat, and there just hasn't been that much interest in them?
There's a legitimate belief in the Colorado market. I would say that's where most of the bets have been coming from. When the teams in the West that you have to get over, Clippers, Lakers, Rockets, it's difficult. Can it be done? I guess it could be, but this is not a shortened season. This is a season where there's 8 games left to play. Those teams will be vying for playoff position, and then we get right into the playoffs, and seeds will then you'll have the top seeds against the higher seeds. And the NBA it's always been difficult for high seeds to get there. It's just too difficult, too many teams to have to beat. So, yeah, I think the Nuggets can win a series. I don't know if they can go much past that. But, the answer to your question, most of the money on the Nuggets has been coming from that Colorado market.
And I guess before we get out of here, I just want to ask you one last general question. I mean, obviously it's been a rough go for everybody in basically every industry over the past few months. What's the feeling been like with people at DraftKings? What's the feeling been like in the industry specifically now that we're entering this territory where, and I know there's a lot that could still go wrong, but it looks like, knock on wood right now, that we are entering a period where we're getting baseball back. We have hockey and basketball coming back. We're going to have events like the Masters in the fall. There's still hope that there's going to be some semblance of a college football season, the NFL. I know you haven't seen anything like this before, but what is the industry expectation and response to how this is all playing out?
We're pretty excited about all these core sports, resuming. We actually did pretty well over the last couple of months. We fished for content. We found it. In May, golf and UFC and NASCAR were just great action, and some of those events beat last year's because, of course, they were isolated and we were in more states. But now that the core sports are resuming, we're pretty excited. Been looking for this day for baseball to start. I don't think I've been as excited for baseball to start because baseball is usually starting right when the NCAA college basketball tournament is ending. And so therefore, it's been a long run of sports for bookmakers, and you're looking for a little bit of a break. Baseball's a grind, goes on every day, but this year looking more forward to it than ever before. And now you're going to have a summer, not only with baseball, but NBA, NHL, and football just around the corner. So exciting times for bookmakers, exciting times for the bettors.
Yeah, listen, I came to love Russian table tennis and the KBO. It satisfied the appetite for a few weeks there, but I'm very happy to finally be getting back to all this action. So once again, Johnny Avello, DraftKings Sportsbook, truly appreciate you joining us and giving us some of your time. I know you're a busy guy right now gearing up for all this action. So once again, we really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Enjoy opening day.
Thanks, man. You too.